All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Chiro Podcast, the business and marketing podcast for chiropractors. We're going to talk less about business and marketing today and more just about life. And I'm not even 100% sure what to call this podcast. I have some things on my mind that I feel like talking about. Maybe this podcast is just for me, but I have a feeling that it'll be helpful for some of you as well. Because one of the things that I try to do as a retired chiropractor, former chiropractor, and as somebody who helps chiropractors all the time is I try to have honest conversations about some of the struggles that we have as chiropractors, some of the mind monsters, some of the things that we deal with. And I don't ever try to paint this picture of being a chiropractor as this just super easy, amazing, abundant, like you should never have any problems. You should never worry. You should never be frustrated. There's no reason you shouldn't be successful as a chiropractor. Like there's so many people out there that'll do that. And I'm not saying that being a chiropractor is terrible. It's entirely possible that you chose to go to chiropractic college because you wanted to help a lot of people and you wanted to make a good living. And that's going to be your path in life. It's probably going to be harder than you thought, just because that's generally how life is. At least that's how my life has been. I don't know that there's ever been anything in my life that's been as easy as I wanted it to be. But I think that's pretty normal. And so I'm not at all going to tell you that you can't accomplish the practice of your dreams, that you can't have the life that you want. But I am always going to be someone that's going to tell you it's probably going to be harder than you think. It's probably going to take more work than you thought. You're probably going to fail more than you thought. And I think that there's a balance there with the hope and expectation and the excitement of being successful and being a chiropractor and having all the things that you want, and balancing that with the reality that those who are successful and those who are doing it well aren't just rolling out of bed and that's just happening. There's a lot of intentionality that goes along with that. There's a lot of discipline that goes along with that. And so what I want to talk about is just some of the struggles that we have as chiropractors, and just two basic things that I want you to keep in mind when you're dealing with kind of life as a chiropractor and as a small business owner. So we're going to get into that. Before I do want to just remind you again, if you want a better chiropractic website, if you want a website that's new patient focused, that's helping you attract more new patients, check out the Rocket Chiropractic websites. You can go to rocketchiro.com and check out some sample websites. You can reach out to me and ask for help, or we can kind of start that conversation about getting you a better website. If you would like a practice assessment where I just look at your website, look at your search engine optimization, and give you some tips and recommendations, I would be happy to do that as well. You can do that for free at rocketchiro.com. There's no obligation. I don't pressure people when they do that. I just give them my honest opinion. Sometimes that gets me in trouble because I've had some people get upset with me because I was honest with them. Because sometimes telling someone they have a website that's not great is sort of like insulting their baby. I don't exactly know why some people take it so personally, but maybe it's just because they put a lot of effort and energy into it, and they swung and missed, and no one ever told them they swung and missed. So I don't know. Hopefully I don't upset you. That's not my intention. I will also say this: if you are shopping for help with your Google ads or with chiropractic search engine optimization, please consider Rocket Chiro. We provide those services. They are really valuable services for chiropractors. They can afford them, and I would love to be in consideration if you are shopping for someone to help you with those particular things. So something that I say a lot as a podcast host and when I talk to chiropractors is that there's one of the really frustrating things about being a small business owner is that there's always going to be more things to do than you have time. Now, maybe the same thing could be said about being an adult. Maybe the same thing could be said about being a parent or being a spouse or whatever that is. Like that's probably life in general. Now that I'm kind of thinking out loud, there's always going to be things that you want to do that you just can't. There's always going to be things that seem important that you could spend time and energy on that maybe aren't that important. And there's always going to be those things that you don't want to do that are super important, and maybe even things that you look back at and say, man, I could have done that differently. I've been doing a lot of self-reflecting, a lot of thinking lately. I don't know if it's just because my kids are getting older, my older kids. I have a split rat now. I got kids in college and I got a newborn. So it's like I've just been thinking about that a lot. And I spent some time with my older boys, my teenage boys yesterday. And we were kind of hanging out and we were talking and we played pickleball together. We did some different things. It was kind of fun. And I just was thinking about that and thinking, there are things that regarding their mom and regarding their life that I could have done differently that were really important, that at the time I just don't think that I understood how important those things were. Trying to start a practice and trying to balance a family. Like, if I've ever given you guys the impression that I did a great job of that when I was starting my practice and running my practice, that is not an accurate statement. I didn't. There's a reason that I got divorced, and there was a reason that happened in my life, and that there's a reason that I talked to you guys about that, is because I could have done that better. Like, I focused too much on the building of the practice and the making money and put too much emphasis on that and not enough emphasis on the interpersonal needs of my family and just the closeness aspect and the taking care of your family in a different way other than money. I didn't do a great job of that. And so I look back at that and I go, man, I could have done that differently. And so as I kind of say that now, as a 44-year-old man talking to a lot of chiropractors who are getting started with their practice and starting with their families and trying to figure all of this out, you're always going to hear me say this over and over again. And you're going to say that there's always going to be more things to do than you have time. And there's three sort of simple things that I try to point out when it comes to this, is that number one is it is your responsibility as a small business owner, as the leader kind of in that leadership in that role, to identify the things that are important. Because not everything is important. Some things seem important, but they're not. Some things feel important, but they're not. Some things that you put off because they're easy to put off are important. So being mature enough and wise enough to look at your situation and really evaluate what is actually important, like long-term, what's important for the success and growth of my practice this year, or what is successful growth of my practice for the next 5 years or 10 years. Also for my family, what is most important for my family right now? What is most important for my kids? What is most important for my spouse? Like, those are things that you have to be asking yourself, and there's no right or wrong answer to that. What is super important to me may not be super important to you, because my goals in life and what I consider success might be different than what you consider success. But the fact remains that it is still your responsibility to figure out in your life a life that is going to have more on your plate than you could ever eat, to figure out what is important. And something that I remind people of that I wish I would have known earlier is that when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. When you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else. There were times where it's like I thought I was being a nice guy by staying late and seeing a patient, or going in on a Saturday when I wasn't supposed to be, and going in on a Saturday, going in to see a patient. And I thought I was being a nice guy. But I didn't realize that when you say yes to that patient, you're saying no to your family, because I was supposed to be home helping with the kids, or I was supposed to be spending time with my family on Saturday, or whatever that is. And I'm not turning this into a therapy session or turning this into like a boohoo session for my life. I'm just saying that you have to understand these things in a very practical sense, that you are going to have more things on your plate than you could ever possibly eat, if we're using that analogy. And that when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. If you choose to spend your life consuming the unimportant, urgent things, you're going to find yourself at the end of your life regretting the fact that the most important things are still there and they haven't been dealt with, haven't been taken care of, and you have neglected them. So just understand that. And I would say identify what's important, identify what's not important, because I think those are the two extremes. There are things that seem urgent that just aren't. There are times where maybe you don't have to answer the phone. Maybe you don't have to answer the phone at all. Maybe you could get somebody else to do that. And that sort of brings me to the third thing, is like, what can you delegate? If it is important, but it's not worth your time, or it's not the best use of your time, have somebody else do it. That's why I talk to you guys about websites all the time. I talked to a chiropractor last week, and I told her, I said, I don't advocate any chiropractor having and maintaining and hosting their own website unless they're sick like me and they just like working on websites. If you like working on websites, you like working on SEO, you like tinkering with it, then fine, do it yourself and do a good job. Most chiropractors aren't like me. Most chiropractors don't enjoy doing that. Now, I guess the other exception to the rule would be if the difference between, if the $30 or $40 or $50 for you to self-host your website is what you can afford, and the $125, $150 to have somebody else do it isn't something you can afford, I would say self-host until you can afford that extra $100 and then have somebody else do it. Delegate it. And I would say that with all of this stuff in your practice is that if there are things that you ultimately don't want, you need to take off your plate, but they're important enough that they need to do now, the goal should be to do them as well as possible for as short a time as possible and have somebody else do it. Because I'm definitely not telling you to put yourself in a financial hole to delegate things that you just can't afford to delegate right now. Stuff like search engine optimization, like I've talked myself out of work a lot, which is kind of dumb on my part financially, but people get a hold of me and they want the results of search engine optimization, which I'm all for. Like I love search engine optimization, and they get a hold of me and they ask me questions about it. And I ask them about their situation. I ask them about their goals because I really want to make sure that it's a good fit. I don't want to have like wrong expectations for what we're doing and how it's going to work and how it's going to help them. And I find out some things and I just go, I don't think this is great for you right now. I think this could be great for you in the future, but right now I don't know that this is the best way to spend that budget that you have. I think there's probably better ways and more effective ways for you at this moment in time to spend that budget. What I'm telling them is having somebody else do your search engine optimization and having it doing it at a great level could be an awesome thing. Just do it at the right time. So I would say that's true for all things. So identify what's important, identify what's not important. Don't do the unimportant things. Just don't. Don't even put them off. Just don't do them. If they're not important, don't do it. Don't waste your time on doing unimportant things. But then when it comes to the important things, you have to divide them up into where's my time best spent and what can I delegate to somebody else? Like those are sort of the way you handle that. And you kind of have to do that your whole career. And it becomes easier with time because as time goes on, you tend to get a little bit more money and you tend to have a little bit more flexibility with what you're allowed to kind of push off. The chiropractors that really make their lives miserable are the ones that micromanage. And it's like you're not very good at delegating. And you find yourself in a situation where you're making more money, you're doing better, you have more success, but then you're not leveraging that success to free you up. So your life ends up being miserable because you never take anything off of your plate because you have a little bit of a control issue. Don't do that. It's not smart. So that's sort of the first thing I wanted to talk about is that there's always going to be stuff on your plate that you can't handle. So you just need to make sure that you're handling it in the smartest way possible. The second thing we're going to talk about is this, and this is the thing that's been on my mind a lot lately, and there's always going to be things that are out of your control. There might be some things in your life that are really important to you, but they just aren't things that you can do anything about. One of my clients who gets a hold of me a lot, mainly because he's a Buffalo Bills fan and I'm a Buffalo Bills fan. Hey, Doug. And so it's like we talk more about Bills than we do about chiropractic and his website and other stuff or whatever. But he gets a hold of me a lot. And he made the comment the other day that he has too much time on his hands because he's spending a lot of time like complaining about the bills and complaining about the government. And he said there's two things, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this on this podcast because I didn't say his last name. Maybe I shouldn't have said his first name. But he is just saying that he was complaining about the bills and complaining about the government, two things that he has no control over, can't do anything about. And it sort of falls into this category, right? It's like you can't spend your whole life obsessing about things that you can't control. There's always going to be things you can't control. Things like what people think, the decisions that your patients make, the government, people getting upset, insurance reimbursement, your past, your own past. Like you can't do anything about it. We've all had moments that are less than great. Like we've all had moments, and if you haven't, my gosh, good on you. But I've had plenty of moments in my life that I'm not proud of, and I could sit there and obsess about it. I'm not saying you shouldn't apologize, and I'm not saying you shouldn't take ownership for the things that you've done, because if you've done stuff, you should try to rectify that, and you should try to fix it and restore it and make it better. But there does come a point where it's like you've done everything that you can do, and it is what it is. The damage is done. The scar tissue is there, and you have to go forward. And beating yourself up over something you can't fix, like you can't go back in time and fix it. Like me saying something about my past family and going, I made some mistakes. I would do it differently if I had to do it over again. Like, what am I going to do about that? Like, I try to have the best relationship I can with my older kids, even though I'm not their dad full time, and I haven't been for a really long time. And so that's sort of the situation. I could beat myself up over it, but I don't. Because I've done everything I can to kind of restore and kind of have a good relationship with their mom. I've done everything I can to have a good relationship with them. I continue to try to have a good relationship with them. And it's like, what am I going to do? There's a certain element of that that's out of my control. And there's a certain amount of that with patients as well. Like things like insurance reimbursement is a good example of that, because what are you going to do about that? I mean, a lot of chiropractors are getting out of it, and I think that's probably smart. Doing the micro practice, cash practice thing, like I think that's probably a really great way, especially for new chiropractors that are getting started. But if you happen to be old enough that you remember good insurance reimbursement, which means you are probably older than me, listen, I don't know that there's a scenario in the future where we get reimbursed the way that we probably should be. I mean, medical doctors are complaining about reimbursement as well. Like, insurance stinks. Like, reimbursement's going down. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to obsess about it? You're going to obsess about the government? You're going to obsess about stuff that you have no control over? Even people getting upset. Like, and I'm not saying like pass the buck on your responsibility. There are times in your practice, and I have this conversation when I do reputation management for clients where I'm helping them get more reviews. I tell them, my goal and my job is not to get you like more positive reviews exclusively and to keep people from saying bad things about you. Like, that's not actually my goal. If you do a bad job and someone's mad at you and they want to leave a negative review, it's not my job to like make that go away. Now, some people do consider that their job. I don't. I consider my job when I'm helping chiropractors get more reviews is I'm trying to help you get as many people as possible to publicly give feedback of their experience with your practice. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm assuming that the vast majority of chiropractors don't have a bunch of patients out there that are mad at them. It's always alarming to me when I see it. I do see it occasionally, and chiropractors don't really want help on my online reputation. And I look at their online reputation and I go, these people are saying things that like there's a few negative things here and they're repeating. You might have some self-work you need to do in your practice. Like, you might be handling things in a way that's not getting you a good reviews, or at least getting you some negative reviews on a regular basis. Most people don't like to hear that. It makes them uncomfortable because they have to look at themselves in the mirror. Most people don't like to look themselves in the mirror. They would rather look at somebody else and say, you did this, and then they want to focus the attention on that. That's how human nature is. It's not like I'm different. I would much rather blame somebody else and take responsibility for myself. It's easier. It's way easier. So don't do that. Like, it's important that you have an honest assessment of your practice. It's important that you have an honest assessment of the situation. Don't just take a negative review or a negative feedback that someone gives you and just be like, oh, they're just mad. Some will, some won't. So what? Next, please. Like, don't do that. That's not healthy. That's not smart. Like, look at it and see is it fair? Sometimes you have to ask people if somebody's being fair. Now, the problem with doing that is because generally the people that are closest to you, unless you have an exceptionally good friend, generally the people that are closest to you aren't honest. They just aren't. They're more concerned about your feelings than they are the truth. Like, that's the truth. Like, if I were to go to the people closest to me and ask them, like, you know, what about me? What's wrong with me or whatever? Like, it makes them very uncomfortable. Like, they're not going to do that. Some might, but most won't. So that's the hard thing about that. The hard thing about if you're not aware of yourself from a practice standpoint, the mistakes that you've made, and you have a hard time listening to feedback where someone leaves you a negative review, and then you look at it and you go, they're being mean. And then you try to argue your point online, which also doesn't help. Not a great idea. Doesn't look good. When you do those things, and then you go to your best friend in the whole world, or somebody who's like a yes man. You go to them and you say, hey, is there anything that I'm doing or saying that's wrong? I even have a hard time with it with my clients. To be honest with you, I have a hard time with it. I usually pull back a little bit in situations like that. I try to tell them the truth as gently and softly as I can. But I don't know that I've ever unfiltered told someone the truth when I thought that they were doing something wrong. Maybe I should. It's uncomfortable. And I'm not even their best friend or nothing. I'm just their client. You know, I'm their coach or their mentor or their person they're paying to help them. But it's awkward. And I try to say it as nicely as possible, but maybe I shouldn't worry about losing a client. Maybe I should just tell them the truth. I don't know. All I'm telling you is that it's a difficult situation, and don't be so quick to assume that what someone says about you is not true or that there's no truth to it whatsoever. There might be some truth that you can handle and you can fix and you can work on. And then there might be a whole bunch of that's a Karen, or it might be a whole bunch of that person's just angry. I've had that. I've had those patients that are mad at me for no reason. I've had people leave me negative reviews about Rocket Chiro that I have no idea what that person's upset about. Don't have the foggiest idea. I'd be happy to talk to them. I'd be happy to fix it if I could, but I genuinely have no idea what they're talking about. So trying to control people or control situations that you can't control is just adding more onto your plate than what you can. I've had people that have purposely and maliciously gone after me. I've had people listen to my podcast for the purpose of trying to find anything that I say that is maybe slightly inaccurate so that they can attack my integrity. I had it happen recently, which I thought was strange. I'll even tell you guys what it is because it's funny. And like you guys are going to think this is stupid. And I think it's stupid, but it's entirely possible someone's listening to my podcast now because they want to prove that I'm not an honest person. I'll tell you what it was. Somebody told me that I said on my podcast that I sold my practice. So this was the podcast where I was talking about 5 things I love and 5 things I hate about chiropractic. And when I was talking briefly about selling my practice or trying to sell my practice, I was talking about how they come up with the numbers for that. Now, I said, and I told the person, I was like, I didn't say that. I've never said that on my podcast because I didn't sell my practice. I tried to sell my practice for a year, didn't sell my practice. And I went back and listened to it. I was like, I'll be darned, I did. It turns out when you have hundreds and hundreds of hours of podcasting, you may say something you didn't know you said. Whoops. So if I have left you guys with the impression that I sold my practice and I did not sell my practice, I apologize. That was not a truthful statement. And if for some reason you chose to use me as a service because you thought I sold my practice and now you found out that I didn't and you're going to stop using me, I will take the terrible lashing that I get for that misspoken thing. And if you're the person who did that, I just want to publicly say you're an idiot, you're petty, and this is so stupid. Hopefully they're not listening to my podcast anymore. Anyway, once again, this is sort of what I'm talking about, where I'm like, there are things in my life, there are things in your life that you absolutely can't control. Can't do anything about it. Do the best you can. Be the best person you can. Be honest with yourself. Be honest about your situation. Be honest about where you screw up. Honest about what you did wrong. Honest about what you could do better. But don't worry about the things you can't control. Insurance, government, people being mad, people being Karens. Don't focus all your energy on unimportant things. Like all of this stuff is going to make your life harder as a chiropractor. It's going to make your life harder as a person, as a human being. So that's it, guys. Life's hard enough. It just is. It's hard to be a good spouse, and it's hard to be a good parent, and it's hard to be a good chiropractor, and it's hard to be a good business owner, and it's hard to be a good neighbor, and it's hard to be a good person involved in your community, and you're going to be dealing with people all the time. And if it weren't for people, life would be a whole lot easier. Don't make it harder on yourself by focusing on things that are not important or by worrying about things that you have absolutely no control over. Worry about yourself. Focus on the important things. Keep the main things the main things. Your life will go a lot smoother. You'll reach your goals a lot faster. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. If you want help with your website, go to rocketchiro.com. If you'd like a free assessment and want me to look at your stuff and give you some recommendations, request my free practice assessment. If you want help with Google Ads or with getting more reviews or with search engine optimization or anything else that I can help you with, I'd be glad to do that. Go to Rocket Chiro. I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. See ya.